What's going on, guys? I want to do a quick video on how to properly install a thermostat housing on a classic car that seems to be leaking. I had the same issue on my 69 coupe restoration that I was doing. So when I first got it, it had this chrome thermostat housing on it. I know they tend to leak and I wouldn't have bought one, it came with it. So generally stay away from those if you can, because they tend to warp or not scuff properly underneath, and they never seem to mate properly without RTV. So when I did get it, I put a new gasket on and I did some Teflon tape around the bolts and the bung up top, but it didn't seem to matter too much. It'll seep out all around here and it wells up right there on the block. It's tough to make out, but I just cleaned it recently, but it always seems to seep, especially when the coolant really starts flowing and the motor is warm. So I'm going to show you how I go about properly sealing a thermostat housing like this. So first off, I'm going to remove it, and then I'll show you what I do from there. Okay, so I got the hose off, pulled the thermostat housing out. This is my thermostat. I have a gutted one to keep this thing as cool as possible. So mine was just sitting right there. So I removed the thermostat ring. You can see here's the two bolts that were in the housing. So I'm going to take a wire brush to those, clean these up, get all the crud off, and then put some Teflon tape around those. Make sure it seals well. And here's the thermostat housing. You can see here is the gasket, the one that I did use to replace it. Didn't really seal all that well, so I'm going to clean this up as well, and then I'll show you how we're going to reinstall it. All right, so looks like this is the real reason. If you can make that out, which you definitely can, it's completely warped. So that's why the gasket hasn't been doing its job, because this piece of crap is completely warped. The previous guy, I don't know what he did, but he destroyed this thing. So now we're making a trip to the parts store, and hopefully I can find one to replace this thing with. All right, so after making a trip to Pep Boys, I was unsuccessful in finding another aftermarket thermostat housing that matched up just like this. Obviously I was not going to reuse this, and no amount of silicone I think is going to fix this piece of crap. So what I did was, being that I have a 460 and it's obviously not true to the 68 Mustang because that wasn't offered, I looked up parts for a 78 Lincoln Continental with a 460, and I had to go over to AutoZone, and they had a Dorman part 902-1033, and luckily they had one left in stock. They pulled it for me, and it's a cast style OEM thermostat housing. Nice and smooth, no O-ring, so that's good. The bolts all match up. It's just a little bit ugly. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to sand it up a little bit, and I'm going to spray it silver so that it matches the manifold a little bit better. And we're going to install this one, and then we'll go from there. I also found some new bolts for anyone that has a 429 or 460. The thread pitch is 5/16 by 18, and they're 1 inch long. So I was able to find these at AutoZone as well. If you see here, the original ones are really nasty and crusty, so got some nice grade 5 stainless looking bolts. guys, so next up We're gonna take the gasket that we got that came with the thermostat housing. I also bought another one because initially I didn't know I was replacing it. For anyone who needs it, the part number is 35041. That's the Felpro part number as well as the Pro Temp. 35041 is for the thermostat housing gasket. And then we're gonna take some of this Permatex gasket maker, specifically designed for the water pump and the thermostat housing. And let's see, the part number on that is 7653017. And we're gonna put a little bit on here. We're gonna spread it across with your finger, and then we're gonna place it onto the manifold and allow that to sit for a couple minutes before we put the housing back on. All right, so next up, I Teflon taped the two thermostat housing bolts as well as the plug here just to play it safe. And I'm gonna add a little bit more silicone now around here and only snug tight the bolts by hand. Give it about an hour or so, as that's what Permatex recommends before you torque it down to spec. So let's get that started. All right, so now we're gonna let it dry. You can see here, looks pretty good. I only have it snug. I didn't torque it down all the way. We're gonna let it dry for about an hour, then I'm gonna torque it down and then we'll reinstall the coolant hose. All right, so I reinstalled the coolant hose and torqued down the thermostat housing. Just make sure you torque it down first before you put the coolant hose on, so this way you're not manipulating it while it's still not completely tight and forcing that seal to break. So I snugged up the two bolts, put on the coolant hose, and should be all good to go. Permatex recommends that you do not start the car or drive the car for 24 hours after you have installed that sealant. So I'm gonna let it rest for a day, come back tomorrow and start it up, and she should be all good to go. So hope this helps anyone who has any issues or troubles with getting a thermostat housing to seal on pretty much any classic car. And this is specific for 429 and 460 Ford and Lincoln motors. So hope it can help someone out.